The mop moved slowly across the marble floor. Back and forth. Back and forth. The same motion he had done 1,000 times before. The same floor he had cleaned for over 20 years. And not once, in all those years, had anyone stopped to say his name. His name was Lito. He was 53 years old. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and his hands were rough from years of hard work. Every evening, when the sun went down and the students packed up their instruments, Lito would arrive at the Kingston Conservatory of Music with his cleaning cart. He would empty the trash bins. He would wipe down the windows. He would scrub the bathrooms until they were spotless. And then, when the building was quiet and dark, he would mop the long hallways where the greatest musicians in the city had once walked. Nobody ever looked at him. Not really. The professors would pass by in their expensive coats, talking about concerts and compositions, and they would not even glance in his direction. The students would leave their empty coffee cups on the benches, their candy wrappers on the floor, as if some magical force would make the mess disappear. They never thought about who picked it up. They never wondered about the man pushing the cart down the hallway at midnight. To them, Lito was invisible. Just another part of the building. Like the walls. Like the doors. Like the old radiators that clicked and hummed in the winter. But Lito had not always been invisible. There was a time, many years ago, when people knew his name. There was a time when he stood on stages, not swept them. There was a time when his hands did not hold mops and brooms. But something far more beautiful. He was born in a small town in the Philippines, in a house made of wood and tin, surrounded by rice fields and coconut trees. His family was poor. His father worked in the fields. His mother sold vegetables at the market. They did not have much, but they had love. And they had music. Lito's grandfather had been a violin player. Not a famous one, but a good one. He played at weddings and funerals, at town fiestas and church gatherings. And when Lito was just 5 years old, his grandfather placed a small violin in his hands and said, "This is yours now. Take care of it." From that moment, Lito's life changed. He practiced every day, morning and night. While other children played in the streets, Lito sat under the mango tree behind his house and made the violin sing. His fingers were clumsy at first. The sounds were rough and scratchy. But he did not give up. He could not give up, because when he played, he felt something he could not explain. It was like his heart was speaking a language that words could never capture. By the time he was 15, Lito was the best violin player in his province. People came from other towns just to hear him perform. Teachers said he had a gift. They said he could go far. They said he could study at the best music schools, play in the greatest orchestras, travel the world, and Lito believed them. He dreamed of it every night. He imagined himself on grand stages, wearing a fine suit, playing for thousands of people who would close their eyes and feel exactly what he felt when the music poured out of him. But life does not always follow our dreams. When Lito was 19, his mother got sick, very sick. The doctor said she needed treatment that cost more money than his family could ever earn in a lifetime. His father sold the farm. They sold the house. They sold everything they had. But it was not enough. So Lito made a choice. He put down his violin. He took a job at a factory. He worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, sending every peso he earned back home. The music inside him grew quiet. The dreams he once had slowly faded, like old photographs left in the sun. A few years later, a relative who lived in America offered to help him get a visa. They said there was more opportunity there, more money, a better chance to support his family. So Lito left everything behind. His country, his friends, his memories. He arrived in a new land with nothing but a small suitcase and a heart full of hope and sorrow mixed together. He found work wherever he could. He washed dishes at restaurants. He cleaned offices at night. He took any job that would pay him enough to send money back home. And every month, without fail, he would go to the post office and send whatever he had earned to his mother. She lived for another 8 years. 8 years of treatments and hospital visits and phone calls where she would tell him how proud she was of him. 8 years of sacrifice and loneliness and dreams that he buried deeper and deeper inside himself. When she finally passed away, Lito was not there. He could not afford the plane ticket. He sat alone in his tiny apartment, thousands of miles away, and cried until he had no tears left after that. Something in him closed. The part of him that used to dream, that used to hope, that used to believe in beautiful things, it went to sleep. And it did not wake up for a very long time. He got the job at the conservatory almost by accident. A friend of a friend knew someone who was hiring. Lito showed up, filled out the paperwork, and started the next day. That was 20 years ago, 20 years of mopping floors, 20 years of emptying trash, 20 years of walking through hallways filled with the sound of music pianos and cellos and violins, and pretending that it did not hurt to hear Dot, because it did hurt. Every single day, sometimes late at night, when the building was empty and dark, Lito would stop outside one of the practice rooms. He would stand there, perfectly still, and listen to the silence. And in that silence, he could almost hear the ghost of his younger self, playing under the mango tree, dreaming of a future that never came, but he never talked about it. Not to anyone. What was the point? That life was gone. That boy was gone. All that remained was an old man with a mop, cleaning up after people who would never know his story. The students at the conservatory were young and talented and full of fire. They complained about their lessons. They complained about their professors. They complained about how hard it was to make it in the music world. And Lito would listen silently as he picked up their trash, and he would think to himself, "You have no idea how lucky you are. You have no idea what some people would give to have what you have." But he never said it out loud. He just kept mopping. Back and forth. Back and forth. Invisible Dot until one cold winter evening. Everything changed. It started with a broken violin, thrown away like garbage. Waiting in the darkness for someone to find it. And Lito, without knowing it, was about to find something he thought he had lost forever. It was the coldest night of the year. The wind howled outside the conservatory windows, and the old radiator struggled to keep the building warm. Most of the staff had gone home early. Even the most dedicated students had packed up their instruments and hurried back to their apartments. But Lito stayed. He always stayed. He was cleaning the 3rd floor that night, working his way through the practice rooms one by one. It was quiet work, peaceful in a way. Just him and the silence, and the faint smell of wood polish and old sheet music. He had just finished mopping the last hallway when he noticed something strange. The door to the storage closet at the end of the corridor was slightly open. That was unusual. The closet was always locked. It was where the school kept broken music stands, old chairs, and equipment that nobody wanted anymore. Lito walked over and pushed the door open. The light inside flickered on, buzzing softly. The closet was a mess. Dusty boxes were stacked against the walls. Old microphone stands leaned in the corner like tired soldiers. And there, sitting on top of a pile of junk, was something that made Lito stop breathing. A violin. It was in terrible shape. The strings were broken and hanging loose. There was a long crack running down the side of the body. The neck was slightly bent. Someone had thrown it away like it was nothing. Like it was garbage. But to Lito, it was not garbage. To Lito, it was a memory. He stood there for a long time, just staring at it. His heart was beating fast. His hands were trembling. He had not touched a violin in almost 30 years. He had trained himself to walk past music stores without looking. He had learned to change the radio station whenever a violin solo came on. He had buried that part of himself so deep that he thought it was gone forever. But now, standing in that dusty closet, looking at that broken instrument, something inside him began to stir. Something he thought had died a long time ago. He reached out and picked up the violin. It was lighter than he remembered. The wood was cold against his fingers. He turned it over slowly, examining every scratch, every crack, every imperfection. And even though it was damaged, even though it was forgotten, he could see what it used to be. He could see what it could become. The next morning, Lito found the building manager in his office. The man was busy with paperwork and barely looked up when Lito knocked on the door. "What is it?" the manager asked, not bothering to hide his impatience. "There is a violin in the storage closet on the 3rd floor," Lito said quietly. "A broken one. I was wondering if I could take it." The manager laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "That old thing? It's been sitting there for years. Nobody wants it. It's junk." He waved his hand dismissively. "Take it if you want. Do whatever you want with it. Throw it away for all I care." Lito nodded and said thank you. The manager had already gone back to his paperwork before the words left his mouth. That night, Lito carried the violin home. His apartment was small. Just one room with a bed in the corner, a tiny kitchen, and a window that looked out at the brick wall of the building next door. He had lived there for 15 years. He had never decorated it. There were no pictures on the walls, no plants on the windowsill. It was a place to sleep, nothing more. But when he set the violin down on his kitchen table, the room suddenly felt different, fuller, like something important had finally arrived. He sat down and looked at the instrument for a long time. He knew he could not play it. Not like this. The strings were useless. The crack in the body would affect the sound. The bent neck would make it impossible to tune properly. If he wanted to hear music come out of this violin again, he would have to fix it himself. And so he began. He went to the library and borrowed books about violin repair. He watched videos on the old computer at the community center. He visited a music shop downtown, not to buy anything, but just to ask questions. The owner, an elderly man with thick glasses and kind eyes, spent an hour explaining how violins were built, how they could be restored, what tools were needed, what mistakes to avoid. Lito listened carefully. He took notes. He bought a few basic supplies with money he had saved. And then he went back to his apartment and got to work. It was slow, painfully slow. His hands were not as steady as they used to be. His eyes were not as sharp. Some nights he would work for hours and make almost no progress. Other nights he would make a mistake and have to start over from the beginning. But he did not give up. He could not give up, because every time he held that broken violin, he felt something he had not felt in decades. He felt hope. Weeks turned into months. Winter melted into spring. And little by little, the violin began to come back to life. He fixed the crack in the body using special glue and tiny clamps. He straightened the neck with careful, patient adjustments. He sanded down the rough spots and polished the wood until it started to shine again. He ordered new strings from a catalog and installed them one by one, tuning each one by ear, just like his grandfather had taught him all those years ago. And then, one quiet evening in April, the violin was ready. Lito sat on the edge of his bed, holding the instrument in his hands. His heart was pounding. His palms were sweaty. He had not played a single note in almost 30 years. What if he had forgotten everything? What if his fingers did not remember how to move? What if the music was gone? He took a deep breath. He lifted the bow, and he began to play. The first note was shaky. The second was uncertain. But by the third note, something changed. His fingers began to move on their own, finding positions they had not touched in decades. His wrist relaxed. His breathing slowed. And the music that he thought he had lost forever, came pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. He played a simple melody, something his grandfather used to play at village festivals back home. It was not complicated. It was not impressive. But it was beautiful. And it was as tears streamed down his face. He did not try to stop them. He just kept playing. He played for his mother, who had never heard him perform on a real stage. He played for his grandfather, who had believed in him when no one else did. He played for the boy he used to be, the one who dreamed under the mango tree, the one who believed that anything was possible. When the last note faded into silence, Lito sat perfectly still. The apartment was quiet. The city hummed softly outside his window. And for the first time in 30 years, he did not feel invisible. He felt alive. From that night on, everything was different. Lito still went to work at the conservatory. He still mopped the floors and emptied the trash and cleaned the bathrooms. But now, when he came home, he had something waiting for him. Something that was his alone. Something that no one could take away. He practiced every night. Sometimes for just a few minutes. Sometimes for hours. His fingers grew stronger. His technique came back, piece by piece, like a puzzle slowly being put together. He started playing more difficult pieces. Songs he had learned as a teenager. Compositions he had once dreamed of performing on grand stages. And late at night, alone in his tiny apartment, the music filled every corner. It seeped through the walls. It drifted out the window into the cold city air. Lito did not know it yet, but someone was about to hear him play. Someone who would change his life forever. But that is a story for another time. Playing alone in his apartment was wonderful. But it was not enough. The room was too small. The walls were too thin. He had to keep the volume low so the neighbors would not complain. And no matter how beautifully he played, the sound always felt trapped. Like a bird in a cage, desperate to spread its wings and fly, Lito started thinking about the conservatory. He knew every inch of that building. He knew which rooms had the best acoustics. He knew which hallways carried sound the farthest. He knew which practice rooms sat empty at night, their doors unlocked, their pianos silent, waiting for someone to fill them with music. That one evening, after finishing his shift, Lito did not go home. Instead, he went to his locker, where he had hidden the violin that morning. He took it out, walked up the stairs to the 3rd floor, and found an empty practice room at the end of the hallway. The room was small and dark. A single window looked out at the night sky. An old piano sat in the corner, covered with a cloth. Lito closed the door behind him. He did not turn on the lights. He stood in the darkness, letting his eyes adjust, letting his breathing slow down. And then he lifted his violin and began to play. The sound was different here, richer, fuller. The walls seemed to embrace the music and send it back to him, warmer and deeper than before. He closed his eyes and let himself disappear into the melody. For those few minutes, he was not a janitor. He was not invisible. He was exactly who he was meant to be. From that night on, it became his secret ritual. Every evening, after the building emptied out and his cleaning work was done, Lito would climb the stairs to the 3rd floor. He would slip into the practice room at the end of the hall, and he would play, sometimes for 30 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. He played old songs from his childhood. He played classical pieces he had memorized decades ago. He played melodies he made up on the spot, letting his emotions guide the bow across the strings. Nobody knew. Nobody ever came to the third floor that late. The security guard usually stayed in his office downstairs, watching television. The professors were long gone. The students were home in their beds. Lito had the entire floor to himself. It was his secret world, his private sanctuary. Weeks passed, then months. Spring turned into summer, and summer faded into fall. The leaves outside the window changed from green to gold to red. And every night, Lito played. He started to look forward to his shifts in a way he never had before. The mopping and the cleaning and the emptying of trash cans, it was all just something to get through. The real reason he came to work was waiting for him on the third floor. The real reason was the music, but secrets have a way of not staying. Secret forever. It happened on a Thursday night in late October. The wind was blowing hard outside, rattling the windows and sending dead leaves swirling through the streets. Lito was in his usual practice room, playing a piece he had been working on for weeks. It was a slow, sad melody, something he had written himself. He called it Mama in his head, though he had never said the name out loud. It was about loss, about love, about all the things he never got to say. He was so lost in the music that he did not hear the footsteps in the hallway. He did not hear the door creak open behind him. He did not notice anything at all until he finished the piece, lowered his bow, and heard a soft voice say, "That was beautiful." Lito spun around, his heart jumping into his throat. A young woman stood in the doorway. She looked about 19 or 20 years old. She had long dark hair and tired eyes. She was wearing a coat that was too big for her and carrying a backpack over one shoulder. For a moment, neither of them moved. Lito felt exposed, caught, like a child who had been discovered doing something wrong. He opened his mouth to explain, to apologize, to make some excuse. But before he could say anything, the young woman spoke again. "Please don't stop," she said quietly. "I've been listening for the past 10 minutes. I didn't want to interrupt." Lito did not know what to say. He stood there, frozen, the violin hanging at his side. The young woman took a step into the room. Her eyes moved from his face to the instrument in his hands. "I'm a piano student here," she said. "I come to practice late sometimes when I can't sleep. I've been hearing music from this hallway for weeks now. I thought I was imagining it at first, but tonight I followed the sound." She paused. "I didn't expect to find you." "Me?" Lito's voice came out rough and uncertain. He cleared his throat. "I am just the janitor." The young woman shook her head slowly. "You're not just anything," she said. "That piece you were playing, I've never heard anything like it. Where did you learn to play like that?" Lito looked down at the violin in his hands. The same violin he had rescued from the trash. The same violin he had rebuilt with his own 2 hands. He thought about lying. He thought about making up some story. But something about the way she was looking at him made him want to tell the truth. So he did. He told her about his grandfather and the mango tree. He told her about his mother's illness and the dreams he had to give up. He told her about coming to America, about the years of loneliness, about finding the broken violin in the storage closet. He told her things he had never told anyone. And she listened. She did not interrupt. She did not check her phone. She just listened, like what he was saying actually mattered. When he finished, the room was quiet. The wind had died down outside. The only sound was the faint hum of the radiator in the corner. "That piece you were playing," the young woman said finally. "The sad one. What is it called?" Lito hesitated. "I call it Mama," he said softly. "It is for my mother. She passed away many years ago. She never heard me play. Not really. Not the way I wanted her to. The young woman nodded slowly. Her eyes were glistening. "It's the most honest piece of music I've ever heard," she said. "You can feel everything in it. The love, the regret, the grief." She paused. "You have a gift. You know that, right?" Leto shook his head. "I am old now. My fingers are slow. My technique is not what it used to be. I am just a man who cleans floors." "No," she said firmly. "You're a musician. You've always been a musician. Cleaning floors is just what you do to pay rent. It's not who you are." Nobody had ever said anything like that to him before. Not in 20 years. Leto felt something tighten in his chest. He looked away, blinking hard. The young woman smiled gently. "I'm going to come back tomorrow night," she said. "Same time. I want to hear you play again, if that's okay." Leto did not answer right away. Part of him wanted to say no. Part of him wanted to protect his secret, to keep this one beautiful thing hidden from the world. But another part of him, a part that had been silent for so long, wanted someone to hear, wanted someone to know. "Okay," he said finally. "Tomorrow night." She smiled and turned to leave. At the door, she paused and looked back. "My father works here," she said. "He's the dean of the conservatory. But don't worry. I won't tell him. This can be our secret." And then she was gone, her footsteps fading down the dark hallway. Leto stood alone in the practice room, his heart beating fast. He did not know it yet, but that short conversation had just set something in motion. Something that would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The young woman came back the next night. And the night after that. And the night after that, and slowly, without either of them realizing it, a friendship began to grow. The friendship grew slowly, like a flower pushing through concrete. Every night, after the building emptied out, the young woman would climb the stairs to the 3rd floor. She would knock softly on the practice room door, and Leto would let her in. Sometimes she brought tea in a thermos. Sometimes she brought cookies from the bakery down the street. And always she brought her willingness to listen. Leto played for her. Night after night, week after week. He played the old songs from his childhood. He played classical pieces that made her close her eyes and sway gently. And he played the piece he had written for his mother, the one called Mama, which never failed to bring tears to both of their eyes. In between the music, they talked. She told him about the pressure of being the dean's daughter, how everyone expected her to be perfect, how she sometimes felt like she was living someone else's dream instead of her own. And Leto told her about the Philippines, about his grandfather, about the long, lonely years of working and sending money home, never knowing if it was enough, never knowing if his mother was proud of him. They were an unlikely pair, a young piano student and an old janitor. But somehow, in that small practice room on the 3rd floor, none of that mattered. They were just two people who understood what it meant to carry heavy things inside. One night, about 2 months after they first met, the young woman arrived with something different in her eyes. She looked nervous, excited, like she was holding a secret that was too big to keep. "I need to tell you something," she said, sitting down on the piano bench. "But I'm afraid you might be angry with me." Leto frowned. "Why would I be angry?" She took a deep breath. "Last week, when you were playing that piece for your mother, I recorded you." She pulled out her phone and held it up. "I know I should have asked first. I know it was wrong. But the music was so beautiful, and I couldn't help it." Leto felt his stomach tighten. He did not like being recorded. He did not like the idea of his music existing somewhere outside of this room, outside of his control. But before he could say anything, she continued, "I showed it to my father." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. Her father, The dean. The man who ran the entire conservatory. The man who probably did not even know Lito's name, even though Lito had cleaned his office 1,000 times. You did what? Lito's voice was barely a whisper. I showed him the video, she said quickly. I didn't tell him who you were at first. I just played it for him and asked what he thought. And Leto? She leaned forward, her eyes shining. He couldn't believe it. He watched it 3 times. He said it was one of the most emotionally powerful performances he had ever heard. He asked me who the musician was. He thought it was some famous artist he didn't recognize. Lito shook his head slowly. This was too much. Too fast. He had spent 20 years being invisible, and now suddenly someone important had seen him, had heard him. It felt dangerous, exposed, like standing naked in the middle of a crowded street. And then I told him the truth, the young woman continued. I told him it was you, the janitor, the man who mops the floors and empties the trash. What did he say? She smiled. He didn't believe me at first. He thought I was joking. But I showed him another video, and another. And finally, he just sat there, staring at his phone, completely silent. She paused. He wants to meet you, Lito. He wants to talk to you about something. The meeting happened the next afternoon, in the dean's office on the 2nd floor. Lito had cleaned that office hundreds of times, but he had never sat in one of the leather chairs across from the big wooden desk. He had never looked at the dean as an equal. He felt out of place. Like a stray dog that had wandered into a palace, the dean was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. He looked at Lito for a long moment before speaking. My daughter showed me your videos, he said. I have to be honest with you. In 30 years of working in music education, I have rarely heard anything that moved me so deeply. Your technique is remarkable. But more than that, your emotion. It's raw. It's real. You play like someone who has lived a full life and has something important to say. Lito did not know how to respond. He sat there, his hands folded in his lap, feeling like he might wake up from a dream at any moment. The dean leaned forward. Every year, this conservatory holds a winter showcase. It's our biggest event. The most talented students perform. Critics attend. Donors attend. It's a very prestigious night. He paused. I want you to perform. Lito blinked. Me? Yes, you. I want you to play that piece. The one you wrote for your mother. I want you to play it for everyone. The room went silent. Lito could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Perform? On stage? In front of hundreds of people? The idea was terrifying. Impossible. He was not a performer anymore. He was a janitor. An old man with rough hands and a borrowed suit that probably did not fit right. I cannot, Lito said quietly. I am nobody. I clean floors. I do not belong on that stage. The dean shook his head. With all due respect, that's not true. That stage doesn't care about your job title. It doesn't care about your age or your background. It only cares about what you have to offer. And you have something extraordinary to offer. Lito looked down at his hands. The same hands that had held a mop for 20 years. The same hands that had once made a violin sing under a mango tree on the other side of the world. The faculty won't approve, he said. They will think it's inappropriate. A janitor performing at the winter showcase. People will laugh. The dean sighed. You're right. Some of them won't approve. I've already had conversations with a few professors, and they think I've lost my mind. He smiled slightly. But I don't care. I've spent my whole life surrounded by technically perfect musicians who play without feeling, who hit every note but say nothing. And then I hear you, a man with no formal training in decades, playing on a violin you found in a trash closet, and I feel something. That's rare. That's precious. And I'm not going to let small-minded people stop me from sharing it with the world." Leto sat in silence for a long time. His mind was racing. His heart was full of fear and doubt and 1,000 reasons to say no. But underneath all of that, buried deep, was something else. A tiny spark of hope, a whisper that said maybe, just maybe, this was his chance. His one last chance to be seen, to be heard, to stand on a stage and finally become the person he was always meant to be. That night, he went back to the practice room on the 3rd floor. The young woman was waiting for him. "So?" she asked. "What did you decide?" Leto looked at her. This girl who had believed in him when no one else did. This girl who had seen through the uniform and the mop and the invisible mask he had worn for so long. "I am scared," he admitted. "I have not performed in front of people in 30 years. What if I fail? What if I make a fool of myself?" She walked over and stood in front of him. Her eyes were steady. Her voice was calm. "The stage doesn't care who you are," she said softly. "It only cares what you feel. And you feel more deeply than anyone I've ever met." She reached out and placed her hand on his arm. "You've been invisible your whole life, Leto. Maybe it's time to let people see you." He stood there, trembling slightly. The fear was still there. It would probably always be there. But so was something else now. Something stronger. "Okay," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I will do it." The young woman smiled a real smile, bright and full of joy. "You won't regret this," she said. "I promise." Leto nodded slowly. He hoped she was right, because in 3 weeks he would walk onto the biggest stage of his life, and everything would change forever. The night arrived faster than Leto expected. 3 weeks of preparation. 3 weeks of practice. 3 weeks of doubt and fear and sleepless nights. And now, suddenly, it was here. The Winter Showcase. The biggest event of the year. Leto stood backstage, his hands shaking. He was wearing a borrowed suit that the dean's daughter had helped him find at a thrift store. It was dark blue, slightly too big in the shoulders, but it was clean and pressed and made him look like someone who belonged on a stage. At least, that's what she told him. Through the curtain, he could hear the murmur of the crowd. Hundreds of people, critics, donors, professors, students, all of them waiting to see the best young musicians the conservatory had to offer. And somewhere in the middle of the program, sandwiched between a piano prodigy and a cello quartet, was his name. Or rather, just the words, "Special Guest Performance." The dean had kept his identity a secret. He said it would be more powerful that way. Let them hear the music first. Let them feel it before they know who's playing. Leto clutched the violin against his chest. The same violin he had found in the trash. The same violin he had rebuilt with his own hands. It felt warm now, familiar, like an old friend who had come back after a long journey. "You're going to be amazing." He turned. The dean's daughter was standing behind him, smiling. She looked beautiful in her black dress, her hair pulled back, her eyes shining with something that looked like pride. "I am terrified," Leto admitted. His voice cracked slightly. "Good," she said. "That means you care. That means it matters." She stepped closer and took his hand. "Remember what I told you. The stage doesn't care who you are. It only cares what you feel. And nobody feels music the way you do." Before Leto could respond, a stagehand appeared. "You're up in 5 minutes," he said. "Get ready." The young woman squeezed his hand one last time. "I'll be in the front row," she whispered. "Play for me. Play for your mother. Play for everyone who ever made you feel invisible. And then she was gone, disappearing through a side door into the auditorium. Leto stood alone. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He closed his eyes and tried to breathe. In and out. In and out. He thought about his grandfather, placing that first violin in his hands. He thought about his mother, smiling at him through the phone, telling him she was proud. He thought about all the years of silence. All the years of being unseen. Tonight, that would end. The stagehand returned. It's time. Leto walked toward the stage. His legs felt heavy. His mouth was dry. The curtain parted, and suddenly he was bathed in light. Bright, blinding light. He couldn't see the audience at first. Just shapes, shadows, a sea of faces blurred by the glare. He walked to the center of the stage. His footsteps echoed in the silence. He could feel hundreds of eyes on him, watching, waiting, judging. And then he heard it. A whisper from somewhere in the crowd. Then another. And another. Isn't that the janitor? Wait. I think I've seen him before. He cleans the bathrooms. What is he doing up there? The whispers spread like ripples in a pond. Leto could feel the confusion in the room. The doubt. Some people shifted in their seats. A few even laughed quietly, as if they were waiting for someone to explain the joke. But Leto did not move. He did not speak. He simply lifted the violin to his shoulder, raised the bow, and waited for the room to fall silent. It took a few seconds. The whispers faded. The laughter stopped. And then there was nothing but stillness. Complete, perfect stillness. Leto closed his eyes. He thought about his mother. Her voice. Her smile. The way she used to sing to him when he was small. He thought about all the things he never got to say to her. All the words that got stuck in his throat. All the love that had nowhere to go after she was gone. And then he began to play. The first note hung in the air like a prayer. Soft, fragile, alone. The second note followed. And then the third, each one building on the last, weaving together into something beautiful and broken at the same time. The piece was called Mama. But it was more than just a song. It was a story. A lifetime compressed into 5 minutes of music. It spoke of sacrifice, of loneliness, of dreams given up and love that stretched across oceans. It spoke of a son who worked in the shadows so his mother could have light. It spoke of goodbye. And it spoke of hope, the kind of hope that never dies, no matter how deeply you bury it. The audience sat frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The music filled the hall, rising and falling like waves, crashing against the walls and washing over everyone in the room. In the third row, a woman wiped her eyes with a tissue. Behind her, an old man with a cane lowered his head and let the tears fall onto his lap. A student in the back, someone who had walked past Leto 100 times without ever seeing him, covered her mouth with her hand and sobbed quietly. Even the professors, the ones who had said this was inappropriate, who had complained about a janitor performing at their prestigious event, sat in stunned silence. Their faces had changed. The judgment was gone. All that remained was something raw and human. The music built toward its climax. Leto's fingers moved faster now, the notes tumbling over each other like a waterfall. His eyes were still closed. He was not in the concert hall anymore. He was back home, under the mango tree, playing for his grandfather. He was in his tiny apartment, sending money to his mother. He was standing beside her grave, thousands of miles away, saying goodbye to a woman who had given him everything. And then, slowly, the music began to fade. The notes grew softer, gentler, like a heartbeat slowing down, like a hand reaching out across time and space. The final note lingered in the air. It hung there for what felt like forever. And then it was gone. Silence. Lit. O lowered the bow. He opened his eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. The room was completely still. And then, somewhere in the front row, someone started clapping. Then another person. And another. The applause spread like fire, growing louder and louder until it filled the entire hall. People rose to their feet. First a few, then dozens, then everyone. A standing ovation. Thunderous. Overwhelming. Leto stood on the stage, trembling, his eyes filled with tears. He could see the dean's daughter in the front row, crying and clapping and laughing all at once. He could see professors who had doubted him now applauding with their hands above their heads. He could see strangers people who had never spoken to him, never even noticed him, wiping their eyes and cheering. For 20 years he had been invisible. For 20 years he had walked through life like a ghost, unseen and unheard. But tonight, standing on that stage, holding a violin he had rescued from the trash, Leto was finally visible. He was finally seen. After the show, people surrounded him. They shook his hand. They hugged him. They told him their own stories about parents they had lost, about dreams they had given up, about the things they wished they had said before it was too late. The music had unlocked something in them. It had given them permission to feel. The dean offered him a teaching position at the conservatory. A real job. A chance to share his gift with young musicians who were just starting their journey. Leto accepted. But he made one request. I want to keep cleaning the practice rooms at night, he said. That's where I found myself again. I don't want to forget where I came from. The dean smiled and shook his hand. Deal. Months later, Leto stood in a practice room on the 3rd floor. It was late. The building was quiet. He had just finished teaching his last lesson of the day, and now he was alone with his violin. He played softly. A simple melody. Something his grandfather used to play. And somewhere, far away, he liked to believe his mother was listening. Finally.